Good evening, dear listeners. Tonight, let's journey back to a time when ancient kingdoms lay shrouded in mystery, veiled in twilight, and where legends whispered through the air like secrets carried by the wind. Close your eyes, let your mind drift, and imagine a princess named Saraphina, bound to a fate hidden deep within the heart of a dark and silent lake. In this timeless land, her story lingers like starlight on still waters, waiting to be told. Let the gentle rhythm of my words carry you as we uncover a tale woven with love, sacrifice, and a curse as old as the kingdom itself. Breathe deeply, relax, and let yourself be swept away into the soft shadows of this enchanted realm. Drift along with us as we begin. In an ancient kingdom shrouded in twilight and mystery, there was a legend woven through the very bones of the land. The tale lingered like a whispered memory, fading on the edges of lips that dared to speak of it. A legend of a princess, veiled in shadows, whose very existence was bound to the silent agony of a curse. Time had worn the story down to fragments, and though people still spoke of her, it was with a sense of reverence for something lost to the ages, something no one had dared to question. The princess, Saraphina, was known only to those who remembered that distant sorrow. She had been born with a beauty that was said to rival the first light of dawn, a beauty that stirred admiration and envy alike. Yet that beauty was a fragile thread, one that would fray and unravel under the strain of a curse she had inherited through no fault of her own. In the heart of the castle, Saraphina lived a life carved out of isolation. Servants who once tended to her had grown used to her absence, whispering about her as they dusted empty chambers or polished stone corridors. She became more myth than memory, an echo from a time that seemed too cruel to bear witness to. By day she moved quietly, a ghostly figure shrouded in sorrow, her footsteps light, her gaze distant, as if she carried within her a burden too immense to share. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows crept across the land, Saraphina would retreat, vanishing into the hidden chambers of the castle. It was in these lonely hours, as darkness claimed the world, that her true torment began. When the first stars appeared, Saraphina's transformation was set in motion. She felt it like an ice-cold breeze slipping over her skin, turning flesh to feathers, voice to silence, and soul to a solitary echo. Her arms would tremble, shuddering as they dissolved into gleaming white wings. Her heartbeat, once steady, would quiet into the slow, sorrowful rhythm of a creature both fierce and fragile. Each night, she became a swan, bound to the waters of the kingdom's lake, a bird of haunting grace and unbearable sorrow. The lake, untouched by the castle's grandeur and hidden by towering ancient trees, became both her prison and her sanctuary. Each night she would glide upon its dark waters, her wings a whisper against the silence, her eyes forever watching the stars that stretched above her like a silent promise. Though the swan's form held her, her heart remained bound to the world of men, to the life she once knew but was forced to forsake. The curse was an intricate spell, woven from threads of envy and betrayal, bound to her by the hand of one who had loved her once, only to let that love sour into hatred. For Saraphina, there was no cure, no end to the cycle of transformation and confinement. She endured in silence, each night blending into the next, each dawn bringing her back to a life that held no hope of freedom. Years passed like leaves carried by an endless wind, each nightfall pressing the weight of her isolation deeper upon her spirit. She felt herself fading, her memories and dreams dissipating like mist over the lake. Yet, in some hidden corner of her heart, she clung to a sliver of hope, a glimmer of light that refused to die, as fragile as a thread spun from moonlight. It was said that the curse could be broken, but only by one willing to sacrifice everything. Such a soul, so selfless and resolute, seemed beyond the reach of this world's fleeting promises. Still, the hope lingered within her, a spark she could not extinguish, though she never knew if it was meant to torment her or to guide her to salvation. The kingdom had long forgotten her face, her name woven into lullabies and fireside tales, while the real Saraphina drifted through her days and nights as a prisoner to the lake. Her silent agony whispered through the castle's ancient walls, and the trees that lined the lake held her story like sentinels of a secret. Yet, in this silence, something began to shift. A murmur of change, like the first breath before a storm. The winds carried news of a knight who had journeyed to the kingdom, one who sought neither riches nor glory, but something nameless, something only the most haunted of souls could fathom. And so, though the lake remained silent, though the stars still watched from their dark throne above, the kingdom itself seemed to hold its breath. For in that silence, a new beginning was born, fragile as dawn breaking over a world that had known only night. In her heart, Saraphina felt the faintest tremor of something she dared not name, hope, a shadow of promise stirring deep within her. It was a whisper, an ache that would not be silenced. Sir Alaric was a man of restless heart and steady hand, one who moved through the world with the quiet purpose of one who has seen both darkness and light, and found little difference between the two. He had arrived at the kingdom's gates under the cover of dusk, drawn by a calling he could not name, yet could not ignore. Whispers filled the air of a hidden sorrow, an elusive tale tangled within the kingdom's history. And though the people spoke of it as little more than legend, it resonated within him as if it were a memory forgotten, a song he had always known. He wandered the land, his armor catching the glint of fading light, his shadow mingling with the long shadows of the evening. and as if guided by the soft pull of fate, his steps brought him to the lake of forgotten tales and silent secrets, hidden in the heart of an ancient wood that stood like guardians against time itself. The lake stretched before him, dark and still as glass, its depths swallowing the last of the day's light. Alaric stood by the shore, sensing an unseen presence in the quiet. And then, in a moment as fleeting as breath, he saw her. A swan, graceful and pure, gliding across the water, her feathers gleaming faintly under the dim glow of the moon. Alaric felt his heart falter, struck by a beauty that was both exquisite and sorrowful. He watched, mesmerized, as she drifted closer, her movements slow and deliberate, as if each stroke carried the weight of lifetimes. She turned her gaze upon him, and in her dark, gleaming eyes, he saw something that defied understanding. A depth of sadness that seemed to stretch beyond the world, a sorrow boundless and enduring. As the night deepened, the knight found himself reaching out, a silent gesture born of instinct and longing. The swan met his gaze, her eyes reflecting a pain that was both ancient and familiar, a sorrow that seemed to beckon him closer. And though he knew not why, he felt as though he had been waiting for this moment his entire life, as if, in this quiet exchange, he had found the answer to a question he could never voice. But as the sky darkened further, the air grew cold, carrying with it the whisper of magic, ancient and forbidding. The swan seemed to tremble, a shiver passing through her as she raised her wings in a display both graceful and forlorn. Her form shimmered beneath the pale light, and for a heartbeat Alaric thought he saw a figure, a woman draped in sorrow, her beauty obscured by shadows. Before he could reach her, the swan spread her wings and took flight, her silhouette a ghostly outline against the silvered moonlight. Alaric watched her disappear into the night, his heart pounding with an ache he could not name, his mind filled with questions that had no answers. When dawn arrived, Alaric found himself still by the lake, the haunting vision of the swan lingering like the remnants of a dream. He returned to the castle, but the image remained with him, haunting him, echoing in his thoughts with the persistence of a memory newly uncovered. There was something in that encounter, a mystery woven in silence and bound in sorrow, that refused to let him rest. The following evening, as if under a spell, he returned to the lake. The night was cold, and the air tinged with an otherworldly stillness. He waited, his breath shallow, his heart thrumming with anticipation and an unspoken yearning. And then, as the moon cast its ethereal glow over the water, she appeared once more. This time, she glided towards him with a sense of familiarity, as if she too had been waiting for him. The closer she came, the stronger Alaric's conviction grew that there was more to this creature than met the eye. He knelt by the shore, his gaze unwavering, his heart open to the mystery before him. And then, with the first light of dawn, a miracle unfolded. Before his eyes, the swan began to change, her feathers fading into skin, her wings dissolving into arms, her form shifting as if shaped by the very light that touched the horizon. Alaric held his breath, transfixed, as the figure of a woman emerged from the shroud of moonlight. A woman of delicate grace, with sorrow in her eyes and beauty that seemed carved from the stars themselves. "Who are you?" he whispered, though his voice trembled as if he already knew. She looked at him, her gaze solemn and filled with a pain that seemed endless. "I am Saraphina," she murmured, her voice soft and hollow, like a song fading into silence. "I am bound by a curse that cannot be broken." Her words hung between them, fragile and irrevocable. She spoke of the enchantment that held her captive, a spell woven from envy and treachery, binding her to the lake, the nights, the silence. Each nightfall she became the swan, stripped of voice and form, her humanity stolen with the setting sun. Only at dawn would she return, her memories of freedom tinged with the dread of another night. Alaric felt his heart tighten, a fierce determination rising within him. He knew, with a certainty that defied reason, that he would see her freed from this torment. Though he did not speak his vow aloud, the promise was written in the very essence of his being. A promise to stand by her side, to uncover the secrets of her sorrow, and if fate allowed, to bring her the freedom she so desperately yearned for. But in his heart, he sensed that the path before him was treacherous, veiled in shadows and sacrifices beyond measure. The nights that followed felt like dreams trapped in a place between worlds, a realm where light and darkness intertwined, and boundaries dissolved like morning mist. Alaric returned to the lake each night, bound by a force he could neither explain nor resist. Under the moon's pale gaze, he waited by the shore, his eyes searching the shadows for the graceful figure of the swan who held a woman's soul captive within her feathers. And each night, just as his heart began to falter, she would appear, gliding across the water with a grace that defied sorrow, her form an ethereal vision beneath the stars. As dawn approached, Saraphina would transform, her white feathers giving way to bare skin, her fragile wings folding into arms as she emerged from the shimmering fog like a figure born of light and shadow. Alaric watched, spellbound, as she took human shape, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of dawn and the sorrow of countless nights. Each morning, she returned to him in silence, and with each passing dawn, he felt the pull of her mystery sink deeper into his heart, like an ache that settled within him, too close and too fierce to ignore. One night, as the air grew cold and the stars shimmered like fragments of forgotten dreams, Saraphina approached him with a gaze that held a tremor of something unspoken. Her transformation had begun to feel less like a curse and more like a ritual, an unveiling of a hidden truth bound by the threads of moonlight and dawn. She stood before him, the last remnants of her swan form fading into the whisper of dawn's light, her voice as soft and haunted as the night itself. "You come to me each night, Alaric," she murmured, her voice a melody woven with both gratitude and despair. "Yet you know nothing of the darkness that binds me." Alaric reached for her hand, his own fingers trembling with the weight of the promise he felt growing within him. "Tell me, Saraphina," he urged, his voice low and steady, though his heart felt as though it bore the weight of her sorrow. "Tell me of this curse. Let me share in the burden that you bear." She looked away, her gaze drifting to the water, the faint ripples mirroring the stars, as if the heavens themselves lay captive within the lake. Her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke, as if she feared that uttering the words might summon the curse anew. "I was cursed by one who loved me," she began, her tone hollow and edged with the bitterness of a truth that could not be escaped. "A man who sought my heart, yet when I could not return his love, he bound me to this lake, to these wings. He swore that if he could not have me, then I would belong to no one, to nothing but the night itself." Alaric felt a surge of anger swell within him, fierce and unbidden, though he fought to keep it at bay, sensing that Saraphina's pain ran deeper than any rage could reach. He tightened his grip on her hand, his gaze unwavering as he watched her. "Is there no way to break this curse?" he asked, his voice as steady as the promise he had yet to speak aloud. She shook her head, her expression heavy with a sorrow that seemed to echo through her entire being. "The curse is bound by magic older than time. A spell woven from threads of love turned sour and hatred disguised as devotion. Only a love that is pure, a love willing to sacrifice itself for another, can break it." Her voice trembled, and she turned her gaze back to the water, her reflection staring back at her with eyes hollowed by the weight of her suffering. "But such a love is a thing of legends, Alaric. It does not exist in this world." Alaric's heart stirred, the resolve within him growing with every beat. He felt himself drawn to her in ways he could neither explain nor understand, a force that transcended his duty, his honor, his own dreams. And as he stood beside her, beneath the vast expanse of the night sky, he knew that his own heart had woven itself into the very fabric of her sorrow, tangled within the curse that bound her. He took a step closer, his voice a murmur that seemed to blend with the whisper of the night breeze. "Then let me find it, Saraphina. Let me be that legend, if it will mean your freedom." She turned to him, her eyes widening with a faint glimmer of something that could only be called hope. A hope so fragile that it seemed ready to shatter beneath the weight of the night's silence. Her gaze softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to reach for him, her fingers tracing the line of his hand as if seeking solace in the warmth of his touch. But as the first light of dawn began to creep across the horizon, she withdrew, her hand slipping from his as she took a step back. Her voice, now filled with an urgency born of fear and longing, broke the silence. "If you wish to seek the truth of this curse, go to the enchanted wood," she whispered. "There lies a power greater than any spell cast in malice. But beware, Alaric, for the path you choose may demand more than even the bravest heart can bear." With those words, she turned and vanished into the lake, her form dissolving into the quiet ripples as the dawn reclaimed her. Alaric was left alone by the shore, his heart heavy yet unyielding, his mind racing with the promise he had made, a promise bound to the shadows and secrets of the enchanted wood. As the sun rose, he stood there still, his gaze fixed on the place where she had disappeared, knowing that his journey had only just begun. In the depths of his soul, he felt the stirring of a vow, fierce and unbreakable, a love willing to embrace the darkness if it meant bringing light to the one who had been bound to it for so long. The forest loomed before Alaric like a gateway to another realm, shrouded in mist and shadow, ancient trees towering like silent watchers, guarding secrets long forgotten. The enchanted wood was no ordinary place. It was a land spoken of only in whispered warnings, a realm where time and truth intertwined like tangled vines. And the path before him was veiled in mysteries no mortal could unravel. But the knight's heart was resolute, bound by the silent vow he had made by the lake. As he ventured deeper, a strange silence blanketed the air, as if even the forest itself held its breath. Shadows flickered between the trees, and faint murmurs brushed against his ears, voices from forgotten times, echoing with warnings and promises lost to memory. The air grew thick with enchantment, the weight of ancient spells pressing upon him as he moved forward, his step slow and deliberate, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. The deeper he went, the more the forest seemed to change, shifting in ways that defied reason. Trees twisted as if writhing in unseen agony, their branches clawing at the sky, their roots snaking beneath his feet like veins of darkness. And yet, amidst the gloom, he sensed a presence, something old and powerful, watching him with eyes that pierced through the veil of the mortal world. Alaric's breath grew steady, his resolve tightening around him like armor as he ventured toward the heart of the forest, where he knew the sorceress dwelled. At last, he reached a clearing bathed in eerie moonlight, though the sky above remained hidden by layers of mist and shadow. At the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak, its bark twisted and gnarled, a living testament to centuries of secrets. And beneath it, veiled in shadow and silence, waited the sorceress. She was as old as the forest itself, her form barely human, cloaked in robes that seemed woven from the night. Her face was hidden beneath a dark hood, her eyes glinting like embers in the hollow recesses of her visage. Her voice, when it emerged, was a soft melodic whisper, each word steeped in the wisdom of ages and the weight of unspeakable sorrows. "You seek a cure for the curse," she murmured, her gaze piercing through Alaric with the sharpness of a blade. "A curse that binds the Swan Princess to the lake, each nightfall stealing her freedom." Alaric nodded, his voice firm, though the gravity of her presence weighed heavily upon him. "Yes, wise one. I seek to break the curse that binds Princess Saraphina, to set her free from the torment that has held her captive." The sorceress tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as she regarded him with something that bordered on pity. "And do you know the price of such freedom, knight? Do you know the path upon which you tread?" "I do," Alaric replied, though in his heart he knew his courage was being tested. "I will do whatever is necessary. I will bear any burden, pay any price, if it means her release." A faint smile crept upon the sorceress's lips, a smile that held no warmth, only the bitter knowledge of sacrifices past. She lifted her hand, and in her palm appeared a small amulet, wrought from silver and adorned with a single crystal that glimmered with an otherworldly light, as if it contained the very essence of the moon. She extended it to him, her gaze never leaving his face. "This amulet bears the power to break the curse," she explained, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "But heed this warning, brave knight. The curse was woven from threads of betrayal and anguish, and it can only be undone by one willing to offer something precious in return." Alaric took the amulet, its weight settling into his palm as though it carried the essence of all the sorrow Saraphina had endured. "What must I offer?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil churning within him. The sorceress's eyes bore into his, her words heavy with the certainty of fate. "To free the Swan Princess, you must bind your own heart and spirit to her curse. The freedom you seek for her will require the greatest sacrifice, your own soul, bound to hers in a pact that will transcend life itself. Only by giving yourself completely, by becoming part of the very magic that binds her, can you set her free." A shiver ran through him, yet he did not falter. He looked down at the amulet, its light casting strange shadows across his hand, the reflection of his own promise, fierce and unyielding. In that moment, Alaric understood the depth of the vow he was making, and he felt his heart fill with a resolve that could not be undone. "I accept," he said, his voice a whisper that echoed into the silence of the forest. "If it will set her free, I offer my soul." The sorceress inclined her head, the faintest hint of approval in her eyes. "So be it, Knight of the Lake. When the dawn breaks, let the amulet bear your love and sacrifice to the lake's edge. Speak her name and give the amulet to the waters. Only then will the curse lift." With a final nod, Alaric turned from the clearing. The amulet clutched tightly in his hand. As he retraced his path through the forest, the weight of his promise settled upon him, blending with the quiet resolve in his heart. The shadows parted before him, and though he returned to the castle as a man, he carried with him the essence of something beyond mortal understanding. A love bound by magic, woven with sacrifice, fierce and unbreakable. And so, as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, he approached the lake once more, the amulet gleaming like a beacon, its light a testament to the love he bore for the princess bound by night's cruel spell. He knew his choice was final, that his own soul would forever be part of the magic that held her. But in his heart, he felt only peace, for in his sacrifice, he had found his purpose. The lake lay silent, awaiting the final act of his vow, and Alaric knew that in the breaking of dawn, he would fulfill the promise that had bound his heart to hers for eternity. The dawn approached with a solemn grace, casting its faint silvery light upon the lake, where mist hovered like spirits, whispering secrets to the wind. Alaric stood upon the shore, the enchanted amulet nestled within his hand, its cold weight a reminder of the choice he had made. A choice that bound his soul to Saraphina's in ways he could neither understand nor undo. The forest behind him was silent, as if all creation held its breath, watching, waiting for the moment that would either lift the curse or bind them both to an eternity of sorrow. As the first rays of sunlight broke upon the water, Alaric called her name softly, his voice filled with a reverence born of love and loss. "Saraphina." The lake, quiet as the edge of a dream, rippled, and from the shadows, the figure of a swan emerged, gliding toward him with a grace that seemed to blur the line between reality and enchantment. She drew close, her dark eyes holding his gaze, a silent plea written within them. And in that moment, Alaric felt the weight of every night she had spent confined to this silent world, her humanity stripped away by a curse woven from betrayal. He knelt by the shore, the amulet held before him like an offering. The air grew heavy, thick with the ancient magic that held her captive. And as he whispered the words the sorceress had taught him, the amulet's light began to glow, a soft pulse that beat in time with his own heart. Alaric held his breath as he extended the amulet toward her, his fingers trembling as he set it upon the surface of the lake, the water rippling outward in concentric rings, as if the lake itself bore witness to the finality of his vow. "By this bond, I offer my soul, my life, and my heart," he murmured, his voice steady despite the weight of his sacrifice. "I give all that I am to break the chains that bind you, to free you from the darkness that has held you captive." The amulet sank slowly into the depths, its light piercing the water like a star descending into the unknown. For a heartbeat, There was silence, a stillness that stretched like eternity. And then, with a sudden burst, the lake began to glow, an ethereal light rising from its depths, illuminating the mist that swirled around them in ghostly tendrils. The light enveloped Saraphina, her swan form dissolving into it as if she were woven from the very essence of dawn. Her wings shimmered, feathers melting into arms, her graceful neck turning into the curve of her shoulders. Slowly she emerged from the light, her human form restored, her face radiant with wonder and sorrow. Alaric's heart swelled as he gazed upon her. The princess who had been hidden within the swan's delicate frame, now standing before him as the woman he had come to love with a devotion that transcended life itself. But as the light faded, Alaric felt an unfamiliar coldness creep into his limbs, a strange weariness that seemed to seep into his very soul. He looked down to see the light from the amulet beginning to merge with his own form, tendrils of ethereal energy reaching out, wrapping around him like an embrace, drawing him into the same spell he had broken for her. Saraphina stepped forward, her eyes wide with horror as she reached for him. "No! Alaric, what is happening?" He offered her a gentle smile, the kind that held every word he could not say, every promise he had made. "The curse needed a soul bound to it, Saraphina. I offered mine, so you might be free." Tears filled her eyes as she took his hands, her grip fierce, as if she could anchor him to this world through sheer will. "No, you cannot. This cannot be how it ends. I cannot lose you, not now, not after you have given me life once more." But Alaric felt his spirit begin to wane, as if the very essence of his being was slipping into the dawn. The weight of the sacrifice, of the magic that had bound him to her, was taking hold, a tether he could not sever. He looked into her eyes, the deep wells of sorrow and love reflecting all that they had shared, all that they had found in one another. And in that moment, he felt no fear, only a profound peace. "You will not lose me," he whispered, his voice as faint as the fading night. "I am part of you now, Saraphina, my love, my soul. They will live in the light that touches you each dawn, in the stars that watch over you each night. I am yours, always." With a final breath, he released her hands, his form fading into the dawn's light, his essence merging with the morning, leaving only the faintest shimmer upon the water. Like the last sigh of a dream, Saraphina fell to her knees by the lake's edge, her tears mingling with the ripples as she watched him disappear, his sacrifice etched into the very fabric of her freedom. As the sun rose fully over the kingdom, Saraphina stood alone by the lake, her heart heavy with both grief and gratitude. She felt his presence within her, a warmth that pulsed with each beat of her heart, a promise bound not by life but by love, a love that had freed her, that had transcended curses and darkness, a love that would forever guide her path. They say that in the early dawn, when the light first touches the lake, a faint figure can be seen upon its surface. The silhouette of a knight standing beside his beloved, a testament to a bond that even the cruelest of curses could not sever. And on the soft whisper of the wind, his vow lingers, a gentle reminder that true love, fierce and selfless, can forge a destiny beyond even the darkest of fates.